Hey, welcome to Mind Your Own Biz, the podcast where we help small business owners with big dreams build something authentically you. I'm Alicia Yervis, educator, marketer, designer, nacho enthusiast, and your big sister in business. I'm excited for us to have this cozy spot to chat. Each episode, we'll tackle candid conversations, actionable tips, and a few fun tangents to help you run your business your way. Because business is always personal, no matter what anyone says. So grab your iced coffee or those nachos, and let's get started. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Mind Your Own Biz. My name's Alicia Yervis. I'm your host. I'm so happy that you're here with me today. And I'm excited because we're both gonna learn together on this episode. We're gonna learn about fractional CMOs, what that is, what that means, and we're going to dive into responsible marketing. My guest today is passionate about both of these things and more, and we're going to get to that in a second. But a lot of this, what we're going to talk about today, is a new space for me. I want to learn about both of these topics more and understand more about them and how they can possibly, help my business, and just some things to be aware of. So we're going to learn together. I thought that would be fun. Also, I just want to make sure that you know, because one of the things we're going to be talking about in this episode is more support for your business. For those of you out there who need a second set of hands and, maybe ChatGPT is great, but it's not, fully cutting it for you. I want to remind you, I have a freebie on my website called VA 101, How to Reclaim Your Time by Hiring a Virtual Assistant. So if you're ready to streamline your business and reclaim your time, my free guide is going to cover everything you need to know about hiring and working with a virtual assistant, from finding the right fit to delegating tasks effectively. Caitlin, my virtual assistant, you've heard me talk about her on the show before. She's been a guest on the show before. She's amazing. She's been working with me for, like 5 years now. And I couldn't imagine my business without her. And, I think sometimes when we're thinking of, well, how do I do that? I can't afford a staff member. I don't even know where to start. How would I even find a virtual assistant? Like all of that kind of stuff. We talk about it. So first, I want you to listen to the episode that I did with Caitlin. I'm going to link it in the show notes, because that's going to give you just a good conversation between the two of us, where we talk about kind of what that process looked like and how folks can get started in finding their own virtual assistant, and some of the do's and don'ts, some of the things that work and don't work. That's episode 7 of this podcast. So scroll back and listen to that if you missed it. And again, I'll put it in the show notes. But after that, I want you to grab this guide, aliciayervis.com/VA 101, because what we're going to talk about in today's episode is also about, support for your business and how do you know if you're ready to bring someone on. And a virtual assistant is maybe the first step to that. Or maybe you need even more support than ChatGPT and a virtual assistant can do. And that's where my guest is going to come in, and get your wheels turning about that idea. So I am so excited today to welcome Kathy Guillory. She is a founder and fractional CMO with 20 years of experience driving strategic growth, change management, and digital transformation for beloved brands. She works with businesses with 3 or more physical locations serving consumers. So I had mentioned earlier that she's a fractional CMO. So, okay, what is that? Well, she's going to talk with us more about that, but just a quick kind of little definition. A fractional CMO is a marketing executive who provides their expertise on a part-time or project basis rather than a full-time salaried role. So we're going to learn more about what that means, maybe how businesses are, basically like, am I ready for that? What are some signs that you or your business might be ready to bring on someone like that or partner with someone like that? And so we're going to talk about what that can mean for your brand. So I'm really excited to just jump right into this conversation with Kathy Guillory. So hi, Kathy. It's so great to have you on. Thank you so much for participating and hopping on as a guest. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me today.
So I just went over a little bit about your background and about your business and what you do. But tell us a bit before we get into some specific questions about fractional CMO work and pet brands and all the things. Tell us a little bit about Belle Bear Marketing, where you're based, where you're coming from today, and who you work with and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's as great a starting point as any. So I am based outside of Portland, Maine. The best way to describe that is we're about 2 hours north of Boston, for those of you who don't know. And I'm a fractional CMO. It's a little bit of a newer term. It's basically a marketing consultant who is also embedded in your business. Think of it in terms of it's like a hiring a part-time executive for your brand. And I work primarily with pet care brands, but I also work with businesses that have multiple locations, that have several different, footprints in a geographic area. So I would say the pet space is definitely my niche. I've been focusing there for the last several years, but I've worked across other industries as well. And I just love working with small businesses, love working with brands that are really growing their physical footprint and helping them expand into new markets and grow.
Mm. So fractional CMO work, like what does that look like in practice? How does that actually work with when you're collaborating with an existing business?
Yeah, that is always the question. Most people are like, well, you're a consultant, right? You're essentially just a consultant with a different title. Sort of, but not quite. So you are a hybrid between a consultant and an employee. So in organizations where I come in, I typically work with businesses that have at least one or two marketing employees already. That's just the size of the business where my skills can make the biggest difference. So they have an
Mm-hmm.
existing marketing team. They have a couple of people who are doing execution. They may have an agency or it may have some additional contractors who they're contracting with for support, but they're not, they don't have anybody leading strategy and they can't necessarily afford to hire somebody full time to do strategy. So that's where I come in. I'll come in and I'll start with a marketing audit, figure out where their gaps are. And then I'm there. The team has access to me. Typically I'm embedded within the team. I'm leading the marketing team. I'm doing one-on-ones with them. I do their performance reviews. I sit in on leadership team conversations. So all the same things that a marketing leader would do. Um, but I am doing it in a part-time capacity, right? So we'll figure out, hey, in order to do it's one of the reasons why I do the assessment first, the marketing audit, I figure out where their gaps are and what level of support they need. And then I tailor my services to them. So if somebody is just starting out, they're expanding into, 2 or 3 different markets, they don't exactly know how to do that. Their team can't handle the strategy of it. I would come in for those 6 months or 9 months and really guide that from the strategic level, meeting with the team in a very hands-on capacity. And then if the business need changes a little bit and they need less strategic support, then I can always scale back to a more, consultant advisory role until they're ready for the next push. So it really is a very flexible option, I would say, for businesses that are really in that stage, right? Where it really makes sense to spend to the expertise, but they may not be ready for a full-time hire yet.
So I love this because, a lot of the stuff that I talk about on this podcast is how to do business your way, whatever way that means.
Right,
Like every business is different, every person is different. Not everything is a
right,
cookie cutter solution. And so I like that your role in and of itself is like,
exactly.
a way of doing something your own way. And then it's also a way for the businesses that hire you to do business in a different kind of, unique way. And so before I ask about, maybe some signs that a business might be ready to explore this idea,
Sure.
I just wonder what made you decide to go this route? What attracted you about, this kind of flexible work environment for yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I started the business a little over 2 years ago, actually 2 years ago in the summer. And I, like a lot of us, had a corporate role where I was feeling very, very burnt out and just pulled in different directions. And I just needed a little more control over my schedule, needed control over my life. I have young kids who at the time were preschool age. Now they're starting school. So I just wanted a little more flexibility in my day, right? So if it's summer and I, want to take Fridays off, or if it's summer and I only want to scale down to, one client in a fractional capacity, I really want the freedom to do that. And then when it's back to school season or it's, fall and things are moving along swimmingly with other parts of my life, right? I want to be able to pick up an extra client or two and really lean into the business. So for me, it really is just trying to find a way that I can still use my skills. I have 20 years of executive marketing experience, could bring a lot of value to an organization at the right time, but doing it on my own terms, right? Doing it in a way that makes sense for me, where I'm not necessarily working 80 hours a week all the time.
Yeah, on our own terms is always
Right.
what I'm gonna try to try to go with,
Sure.
as much as possible. So okay, what are some signs that a small business owner might actually be ready for this level of help? What comes up for you in those conversations?
Yeah. So there are a couple of different signs I look for. So there has to be some sort of a catalyst for growth, right? 9 times out of 10, there's sort of a leadership transition. So if they've gone through a couple of marketing leaders in the last year, 2 years, maybe they tried to hire like a marketing director, wasn't quite the right fit. In a lot of cases, it is a new CEO that is coming on and realizing, hey, we really need to invest more in marketing, where we may be lacking this particular skill set. So it usually starts with like some sort of a change, right? If it's not a person change, then it'll be a new mandate for growth. So we're going into a new market, we're launching a new product. It could be something as simple as like, we're doing all the same activities we were doing last year, but sales are flat, right? So what can we, they may not necessarily know what the problem is, but they need someone to they know that what they're doing right now is not working. And so they just need that
Mm-hmm.
outside perspective to come in and sort of put them on the right direction, right? Like what problem do we fix today versus what problem do we fix 6 months from now?
Mm-hmm. And when you work with these different brands, is there an average like duration of the time that you work with them? Is it just ongoing? Like, how does that get decided?
So that is the beauty of it. It is very, very flexible and very specific to their needs. So I like to start most of my engagements with a marketing audit, and it's really
Okay.
comprehensive. So it takes about 2 months, and I really get under the hood, right? I'm in there, like I'm looking at past campaign performance. We talk about broader topics than just marketing. Like we look at your competitive landscape, we look at your different environmental factors, different regulations that might be coming down the pike, looking at the team structure. I review all the contracts with existing agencies, contractors, to make sure that they're not um, double billing for different things, or not even double
Hmm.
billing, but that you don't have different providers who are charging you for the same thing, right? That's happened a
Hmm.
few times. There's actually one company where they had about $30,000 in SEO services that both agencies were contributing, were responsible for. And so they were
Ooh.
essentially double paying for a service that they were already getting from somebody else. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, a lot of times, coming in and uncovering, I can really uncover those types of nuances with just an outside perspective, right? I'm not in the business day to day at that point. So typically for those first 60 days, like I'm coming in as an outsider, I'm talking to the team. Um, and then we're really trying to figure out, okay, here is your full picture, right? Here's where you are. And then I will sit down with the leadership team, typically the CEO, sometimes the CFO. There's the marketing team if they well, hopefully they'll have a marketing team that's at least one or two people, like I mentioned. And we'll go through
Mm-hmm.
the audit, and then we'll prioritize it based on business need as well, because not all problems are equal, right? So something like building a crisis management plan may be a really great idea down the road, but if your funnel is leaking, then your funnel is leaking, and we got to
Mm.
fix that today. So it's really, really looking at it through that strategic lens of, hey, let's prioritize this based on business need, business and impact to the bottom line, and then based on that, I'll put together an engagement that makes sense. So like a lot of the brands I work with need foundational brand work. So something that I really enjoy doing, one of my favorite services, is doing positioning and messaging work, where we
Mm.
really figure out like who their audience is, who their competition is, how do they differentiate themselves, and then build out a messaging and a content framework for it. Typically, we would want to do that before we go and update your marketing collateral, right? We would do
Right.
that before we do a content overhaul on your website, because we have to touch it twice anyway. So it's really figuring out what the problem is, and then putting together an engagement that supports that. I would say, the average is probably 9 to 12 months. That's my
Mm-hmm.
average engagement. Some have lasted longer, some have been a little bit shorter as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it really is just like marketing, right? It's a long-term investment. Probably
Sure.
if you're only bringing me on for 2, 3 months, we're not going to see the results of the campaigns or any of the things I put together until long after I'm gone,
Right.
right? And I like to be there to kind of um, set some of those expectations up front too. Like if we're doing brand work, if we're doing SEO work, that is not the equivalent of optimizing your Google ads, right? Where you may see results from one tomorrow, but the brand work is going to take, 18 to 24 months, right? SEO work is going to take
Hmm.
6 to 9 months. It's not something that you fix today and all of a sudden get calls tomorrow.
Yeah, it needs time to cook. It needs time to do its thing.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. And so just setting those
Yeah,
expectations. And I like to be around for that because, I like
sure.
to monitor it just as far as like leading indicators go, right? How are we doing? And then also, I'd like to be there to kind of help adjust, right? If something isn't going as well, or if we need to pivot halfway through, I would hate to kind of go and set something up and then leave,
Yeah.
and then have something break, right? That I think is the
Hmm.
difference. Another one of the differences between really a fractional CMO and a marketing consultant, right? Is that for a consultant, the project is usually time based. You usually hire a consultant for their skills, right? So, like,
Hmm.
I'm hiring someone to do SEO, I'm hiring someone to do brand work, I'm hiring someone to do website design. Um, Whereas with a fractional CMO, you're hiring them for their marketing expertise, but also for their leadership skills because it's someone who's leading your team as well.
Hmm. And I also love too that because there's so many things that fall under the category of marketing, it also gives you variety in your projects and your day to day with these
Yes.
teams, with where
Yes.
they need specific help. And so that keeps things interesting too. So I love
Yes.
that. And also like I think so many business owners, we're oftentimes we're too close to our business to really be able to identify our blind spots. And so when you gave that example of like, hi, you're wasting all this money by paying, two groups for the same thing, like I imagine that's such a sense of relief to these business owners. Maybe some embarrassment, but like,
Sure.
the sense of relief of like, oh my God, like you just saved my butt
Sure.
because I didn't even realize, I'm paying double.
Exactly. And I always try to go in with that, right? Like I'm not there to get
Hmm.
anybody in trouble. I'm not there
Right.
to, have anybody be embarrassed, right? Like I'm there because there's a problem and they just may be too close to it to figure out what it is, right? So I always
Yeah.
try to set the stage with the team as well, right? I'm coming in and they're all like nervous, or are you going to come in and get rid of me? Like that's not my goal at all, right? I'm trying to figure out
Yeah.
what is the like, is there a leaky funnel, right? Is there a specific problem that they just might be a little bit too close to?
Yeah. And when you talked about strategy, you mentioned that a couple times just now. What do you think are some common like misunderstandings about what marketing strategy is versus what it's not? Like I feel like sometimes strategy is kind of like a buzzword thing, and there's not really everyone doesn't have the same opinion of what it really means.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
I think a lot of people think that marketing is your advertising, right? It's your billboard, it's your campaign ad, it's the email you send, but those are the actual tactics, right? Those are the channels and the specific tactics that you're sending out, and they should roll up to an overarching marketing strategy, and your marketing strategy should directly align to your business goals. So, like, I'll give you an example. If I'm working with a pet brand and they are launching a new mobile app, right, to support their multiple locations across a large geographic footprint. So that is an organizational goal, right? The organizational goal is in Q2, we are going to launch XYZ um, app, and it's going to have like a technology component, an operations component, a marketing component, right? And so the marketing strategy for that business goal should be, take this app to market and increase, and have 20% of target users downloaded by X date or wherever else. So your marketing strategy needs to be really, really specific, and it needs to be tied directly to that business goal. And then everything you do, all the activities, the marketing plan that follows, the emails, the channels, the billboard, the ads, all of that should support the overarching goal of, hey, we're trying to bring this new pet care app to market. What I think a lot of times people think, they try to kind of separate them, right? Like, oh, we're doing marketing over here, right? We're just promoting us and all of our services. When at the end of the day, the activities you're doing may be great, but they're not necessarily aligning to what the business goal is. So
Hmm.
therefore, at the end of the year, at the end of the quarter, when you're trying to measure the results, you can't do that, or it's a lot harder to do that. You can, if you
Hmm.
set this up correctly, you can even do this with brand campaigns, right? And I think brand is very much something you can measure, right? You can look at your organic search results, you can look at your, organic search traffic, you can look at your brand sentiment scores online, your reputation, all of that. But you have to make sure that the overall strategy the marketing strategy is directly aligned to what you're trying to accomplish and have the right KPIs. Otherwise, you can't trace it back.
Mm-hmm. Such a good point. Yeah. And when you're talking about um, the overall, I guess, power of a brand, I would imagine that well, I know, I know just from working with, with my clients, and in my experience, like clarity is really a non-negotiable, if you want to grow. And I think that that is something that I have seen some of my students, my clients struggle with a bit when they're trying to plan out a marketing plan or, a campaign, whether they're launching something new or not. It's like, I guess, how does a business identify ways that they are not clear, and how can they get more clear in that messaging? Like you talked earlier about how you love working on, the messaging piece. What are some ways that they
Yeah.
can work on that?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite exercises. So messaging is typically an outcome of something that we in the biz call positioning. And your
Hmm.
positioning statement, actually, I'm going to read one to you. So the
Sure.
beauty of a positioning statement is it talks about your competition as well. So it is who you are, and what you're offering in relation to your competition. So a positioning statement would read something like, for these types of people who have these kinds of needs, we are this kind of organization offering these kinds of benefits, unlike the competition. Here's how we're better, and here's how we're different. It's usually a very long statement because it has all those
Mm-hmm.
different components, and it reads like it's copy you would see on a website, but it's not. And so to build it, you take it into these building blocks, right? So you figure out, okay, for these kinds of people, who are the people, right? You go through, you look at your ideal client profile, what are their needs? That translates to number two, right? What are their specific needs? Right. You talk about what kind of organization you are, right? We are, a pet care brand. We offer a dog training, grooming, boarding, daycare, right? These are the
Mm-hmm.
types of benefits as they translate to them, unlike our competition, unlike the big box national retailers that also offer this, right? Here's how we're
Mm-hmm.
better and different. That's where a lot of the meat is that you're going to end up translating into your messaging. And so that looks something like, we are locally owned and operated, right? Our staff is trained. We have cameras in all of our dog boarding suites, and we make sure that you can see your pet while you're away, right? So we give you confidence in that. And then your positioning statement translates into messaging. Things like your brand promise, right? Here's who we are, and here's what we are promising to deliver. Your elevator pitch, which is usually a really quick, right, 30 seconds or less. Here's what we do. Here's who we do it for. Other components like your brand voice, right? Are you formal? Are you trying to educate? Right? Are you more conversational? Are you more approachable? And then you have your long list of proof points that you weave into your content. And these are things like, we're locally owned and operated. All of our staff receives X hours of training. We're the only place with a mobile app where you can book your pet care appointment from anywhere. You can tap into our large network. This is where the proof points is where you would see a lot of the final kind of the final outcome of marketing that you would see
Mm-hmm.
in copy, right? You would see it like on a website or in an email or wherever else. And so I think when you
Mm-hmm.
really take it down to these like fundamental components of positioning and then messaging, your content ends up performing a lot better, right? Because you're talking to the right audience and the right channel in the right place. And what a lot of
Mm-hmm.
brands
Mm-hmm.
struggle with is like they know who they are in terms of they have mission, vision, values, but they haven't done this exercise specifically for their audience, for their target
Mm-hmm.
customers, and they haven't looked at it through the lens of how are we different than our competition. And that's where I think it sometimes falls short. Um, is where you're really just talking about we do this, right? We do this, we do this, we do this, which is great, but how is that different? And what is the benefit, right? What is the benefit to me versus what is the feature that you have?
Mm-hmm. So everyone listening, I want you to rewind and listen to everything Kathy just said, because she gave you a formula. She literally gave you a formula that you can reverse engineer, plug your stuff into, spend time on it. Don't do it in
Right.
3 seconds. Spend time on it, talk with your team, talk with your people, talk with yourself, and start plugging in these things. And then once you've done that, then create the messaging from that. So thank you for sharing that. That was like an
Sure.
awesome quick win. Like that's great. Because yeah, I think
Good.
sometimes, people have the best intentions and they, I know I'm awesome. I'm so passionate about what I do and who I serve. And, I care so much about my work, but like, how do I explain this? How do I put it into not only words, but the most strategic and effective words? And the right phrasing, like what you're saying. So that was awesome. Everyone go back and rewind and listen to that again.
Love that.
um so talking about pet care and pet brands, I mean, you just mentioned a bit about it, with building brands that people trust, in particular when other folks are caring for our pets. Our pets
Mhm.
are our family. How does trust come into play specifically when you are working with pet brands? What are some of the things that
Yeah.
are important to brands like that?
I think it's huge, right? So, something like the number of pets in this country are going to outnumber the number of people, right? In
Mm,
the next like 3 to 5 years, something along those lines. Like the stats are just mind-boggling when you really think about the growth in the pet care industry and in the animal
hmm
health space. And so trust is it's so important. It's critical. It really is what everything is based off of, right? When you're dropping your puppy off for training, or if you're dropping your dog off for boarding or grooming or wherever else, like peace of mind really makes all the difference. It's the equivalent of like taking your, dropping your baby off at daycare, right?
hmm
Those of us who've been there, right? Like working moms going back to work 68 weeks, right? Take your newborn baby and hand it to somebody. You're doing that, right? You're
hmm
doing that. And the hard part is, your animals are innately trusting and they can't tell you what's going on, right? So they can't communicate with you. They can't tell you like what is going on in at the boarding place or at the grooming place. And so
mm,
you really are placing a lot of your trust into the reputation of that brand, which is really what it hangs on, right? So things like reviews become incredibly important, feedback from users, different, just the feeling you get when you walk into the room, right? When you walk into a facility and that type of setting is incredibly important.
hmm
Same in a digital presence, right? So if you're building a mobile app that's designed to give either advice at various stages, or it's designed to be like a almost like a triage virtual care app. I've talked to a lot of founders who are trying to stand something like that up in recent months. It's incredibly important, right? How are you different from everybody else, and where's that trust factor? I think establishing that credibility and trust is really what's going to make or break your business, because it's so personal, right? That's my baby,
hmm
right? I have two dogs,
Of
and
course.
I'm very, very particular about where they go. We drive, there's a vet clinic literally across the street from my house, but I drive to the one 20 minutes away because they know me and that's where they go, right? Like we drive 45 minutes away for grooming because it's the only place that my corgis are
hmm
herding dogs they're a little sensitive about their paws. That's just like a thing, I
Mm.
guess. And so this is the only person in the world he will let touch his nails. And so whenever I show up, he's like,
Aw.
"Hi, here, look at my paws." And he's just trimming and he's happy. I go to touch it to like shake his paw and he freaks out. So
hmm
so that trust factor is just really, really important. And a lot of times, when we think about brand, right? Again, the average person, the average consumer, is going to say, "Oh, it's your ad, it's your billboard, it's your sign, it's whatever." But it's really much more than that, right? Your brand
Yeah.
is how people feel about you, right?
Yes.
It is every single interaction that they have with you online, on the phone, when they're there in person, right? On your mobile app.
Yes.
And it's I think it was Jeff Bezos who said it, it's like the culmination of what your customers are saying about you when you're not in the room, right?
Yes.
And so you want to make sure that it is that every single person who touches that and helps create that experience is rowing in the right direction, right?
Mm. hmm
Because if
hmm
you are looking at if marketing is like, "Oh, we make things really, really easy," and it's so, like, I worked for a brand that did this years ago. I worked for a credit union, and we were like, "Oh, we do banking differently. It's so easy. It's so great. It's so easy. Go sign up." And you get to the website and there's like a 45-page PDF you have to download and print and
Mm.
bring in person and meet with a person
Mm.
for 2 hours. And that doesn't feel like it's different, or doesn't feel like it's easy, right? So,
Right. It
and
feels like
people
they lied to you right away.
and so people really notice those things, right? That's part of it. Like marketing can make the promise, right? Marketing does make the promise a lot of times in our communication, but it's really up to the entire organization to deliver on that promise. And so I used to do, one of my favorite exercises is to do these brand camps, to these employee brand camps. And at the same credit union that had this issue, we would do brand camps once a year. I was doing for like new hires as they came on, and then for the whole company. And the exercise I had was like, how many of you talked to a customer? And like half the room would raise their hand. And then it was, how many of you talked to other employees? And everybody would raise their hand. And it's like, well, you own a part of our brand, right? Because brand translates internally as well, right? It's how we interact with each other, and it's how we design and build these experiences.
Mm-hmm. So many good points in what you just said. Yeah, like the bank example, I've had that happen to me, not with a bank, but with something else where, it's a lot of promises up front and it gets you to swipe your credit card and you're all set, and then once you start onboarding, it's like, this isn't what you said. Like
Right,
this is totally the opposite. If I knew it
right.
was going to be like this, I would have been out of here. Like, so I really appreciate you saying that. And also I want to back up because I was going to ask you, are you a pet owner? I assumed that you were.
Yes.
But so I'm happy to hear about the corgis. I love corgi butts. They're so cute. And do your corgis have the little socks, the little white paws?
Yeah, he does. So I have one corgi who
Oh,
is
one
about
corgi.
30
Okay.
pounds. He's like 28 pounds. His name is Half Pint. He is the boss of the house by far. And then it gets funnier. And then I have a 90-pound golden retriever who's very much not the boss of anybody.
Oh
And
my
so
God.
he
Do
like
they get
follows.
along?
They get along great. Yeah. And my
Good,
golden's name's
good.
Dr. Watson. He's about 4. But he's so funny because
Oh.
he's like 3 times the corgi size, but the corgi runs the roost. I mean, he herds us, he herds the kids. Like
Oh my
he likes it when we're
God.
all in the same area. Like he gets very
Mm-hmm.
nervous when half of us are like upstairs or downstairs. Like he really wants everyone to be like tight, tightly knit area. Like I want you
Yeah,
together. I need you here, and then I can go take a nap. We had
exactly.
a we had some neighbors over a few weeks ago, and they were out in the yard and kids playing. A couple of them had their dogs, and we kind of all looked around, and then about the first 15-20 minutes, we were all kind of in this like perfect concentric circle. Right. And then we turn
Mm-hmm.
around and Half Pint's just like running circles around us, like, okay, nudging you a little with the nose, like, you're here and you're here and you're here. And then he just went off to
Oh,
go take a nap on the back porch. And I was like, I guess your work is
oh.
done, buddy. We're all done.
He can monitor you all in one spot. Now he can settle and
And then
everything's
he's
good.
done. But it's so true. It's so true. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's just so cute how some of those instincts, and he's never been taught to herd, right?
Right,
He
right.
lives in Maine. Like we have no cows.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that. That's so cute. And also I want to say, thank you for sharing the example too of like, hi, there's somebody right across the street I could go to, but I'm not going to because I vibe better with this place. I don't like that place as much because of maybe an experience or whatever, and I'm willing to go out of my way to, go to a destination that I trust. And I think that can cross many different industries, many different types of businesses. Like, when you have a great experience or when you have an icky experience, it can cause you to, I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to go an hour extra or 10 minutes extra or whatever it is, because I know myself, just speaking specifically about pets, my best friend has a dog, and there's been many times over the years where, whether it's a pet store or a groomer or, a doggy hotel or whatever the things are, we've had some not great experiences at places where something's just kind of doesn't feel right, or maybe it's dirty, or there's smells in the air or whatever, and you're like, I am never coming back here, or I'm not even going to have this
Leaving. Yeah.
appointment, like we're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you saying that, because I think that that's a very powerful example of, not only are not only are you not necessarily getting business from people that are closest to you, but they're actually willing to go completely in the opposite direction to go to one of your competitors because of the experience they had at your place. It's such a good
Yeah.
awareness piece.
It
Mm-hmm.
is true. It's true. I mean, with the vet, they're like right up the street. We went there twice, and we're like, no, I think we're going to stick with to where we were. And we actually had like our records transferred, and then we're like, oh, let's transfer them back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which is a
No,
hassle,
it's
right? You would think that that's like a friction point, and you would think like, oh, no one's going to do that, but they do, right? People care, and they do, and you need to be prepared for that, right? Like every interaction
yeah.
matters, right? The
Yep.
something that we used to say when we do like customer service or experience training, it was, every customer every time, right? It wasn't enough just
Mm,
to be like every customer, like you literally it had to be every single time, because the one time you don't is the one time that it makes a really big difference.
yes. 100%. And when you work with your brands, whether they're pet care or not, um, do you like you talked about online reviews before, you talked about customer reviews before, which are I'm always trying to get my clients and students to understand the importance of reviews as well.
Yes.
And of asking for them and all of that kind of stuff. Is that a regular part of what you try to do with your brands too? Is getting them to ask for those reviews and caring about what the reviews say and looking at
Absolutely.
them?
Yep. Yep. So part
Yeah.
of the audit, actually, the chunk of the audit is the is brand. And when we talk about brand, I actually break it up into two parts. So we do external brand and internal brand. And your external
Hmm.
brand is like your, look at some of the brand advertising that you've done, right? Do the colors on your website match? It's the more aesthetic visual representation of it. But the
Hmm.
internal piece has a huge review component, right? It's like, do you monitor online reviews, right? Do you have somebody assigned to them? Do you have some standard practices for how you respond to them? Because responding to reviews in a timely and organized manner is critical, right? Even the
Yes.
negative ones, I would say, especially the negative ones. So you say, thank you so much for the feedback. Like you make it specific. You try to take the conversation offline as quickly as possible.
Yes.
And what that does is it lets others know that somebody is paying attention, right? Somebody cares.
Hmm.
Somebody owns this. Somebody is paying attention. And then if someone is, trying to just troll, which happens too, right? Sometimes people are just like, oh, I just, want to jump on the bandwagon to bash somebody, right? For
Hmm.
whatever reason, it
Yeah.
deters people from doing that so casually, right?
Yep.
It just makes it like, makes you feel like, oh, someone's paying attention, somebody owns this. And so if you have a legitimate grievance, please, right, share it, of course.
Sure.
It's not to say that to discourage legitimate reviews or anything, because I think those are so, so important. It's the I think it sometimes just deters more people from kind of attacking you and jumping on the
Piling
bandwagon,
on.
because they
Hmm.
piling on exactly when they think no one's paying attention.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a critical component. I also encourage all brands to measure NPS, your Net Promoter Score, if they don't,
Mm.
to really start doing that, and to come up with a regular cadence of how you do it. Right, your NPS isn't just something you measure once; it's something you measure. You should be measuring with some regularity. Right, maybe it's not every single interaction, but maybe it's every third interaction or every 90 days or whatever, depending on how your business is, because it'll give you a very good benchmark of how you're doing. And NPS, for those of you who don't know, Net Promoter Score, it's this one question. It's, would you recommend us to friends, family, colleagues, whoever? You can kind of
Mm.
fill in what that is. And you can do it at the company level or at the service or product level. And it's really common. But the beauty of it is it's kind of transferable, right? Like there are benchmarks for different industries. So you can see how you're doing, and your score
Mm.
is, it's typically a number, so it's not like 40%, it's 40, right? What people don't realize is your NPS can go, it's great if it's positive. Your NPS can also go negative. So some people are
Hmm.
like, oh, I'm in banking, my NPS is 45, that's really bad. It's like, well, it's actually not, because most banks have an NPS score between 40 and 55, so you're right smack in the
Mm.
middle. And then when you look at some of the kind of most hated brands in America, right, you think of like healthcare companies or wherever else. Like I think at one point Comcast, it was like negative 24. I think United Healthcare is
Mm.
like negative 42, right? So you start getting into, it can go negative as well. And that just means that more people are detractors. So they would not recommend you than they would. So it just
Yeah.
gives you like a really good way to measure where you are in relation to others in your industry. And then you can
Mm.
also just track, growth over time. So like if your NPS score is 45, right? Maybe for next year you try to set it to 48 or 47 to have that incremental growth.
Hmm. Interesting. I have never heard of that. This is a new term to me. So
Oh,
I'm going
I
to do
love it.
this after. I
Yeah,
mentioned in the beginning of the episode before I welcomed you on, I said, I'm going to be learning a lot on this episode too. We're going to be learning
love it.
together. So I'm excited to check that out. Thank you. And also, I want to say thank you so much for what you were explaining there about negative reviews, because I have heard so many folks are they're afraid to ask for reviews because they are worried about maybe one day getting a bad one. And, or maybe they did get a bad one, they don't know how to handle it, whatever. And I loved what you said, and I completely agree about acknowledging it upfront and early, and then trying to take the conversation offline so that folks who are visiting, your Google page or your whatever can see that you're engaged, can see that someone is aware. And I also think, if it is kind of a one-off complaint from a cranky person or whatever, I think that the folks who are reviewing your reviews can see that it is a one-off and that it's not, necessarily that big of a deal. But also, I have seen it go completely the other way, where the business owner just goes off the rails, becomes so defensive, and then that becomes such a bigger mess. And I think that the way that you conduct yourself online can do so much more damage than the actual negative review if you got one. And so to try, and I know it's hard, like, people are emotional, passionate people. You care so much about your business as your baby. I get it. But like at the end of the day, you've got to be professional and take it in stride and try to make it right with the customer if it's valid. And if it's not, okay,
Totally.
you're not gonna please everybody, but please don't fly off the rails publicly. Please don't turn
This
this
is not the
into
time. Yeah. This
no,
is not
it's
the time
not.
to do that, right? This is not the time
Nope.
to do that. Now, what I've seen a couple of times is where the brand is like very, mindful and very respectful in the response. But then the other customers, then your promoters start jumping in, going like, oh, this has to be
Mm,
an isolated incident because, Debbie's doggy daycare is fantastic and we love them, been going there for 20 years, right? And so that's the beauty of like doing this and kind of building a community of these promoters as well is
yeah.
in a lot of those cases, you can have your promoters who can jump in. And for them, right, they can get defensive on your behalf because they're not your brand, right? So they
Yes.
can go in and be like, oh, you're just having a bad day because blah, 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 right? So
Yep.
and that's always, it's always so beautiful to see. Like one of my favorite things to see is is when your one of my measures to say that marketing is working is when the customers or the promoters or the audience, the ambassadors, whatever you want to call them, when they start using the words that we use to describe the brand internally, right? When they start using it
Mm,
themselves. So if you're saying like, oh, we're trustworthy because of this, right? We, relationships founded on trust, or we do whatever differently or whatever, like your brand promises, right? When they show up to articulate that using their own words, but communicating the same message, that's when you know that you are delivering on your brand promise. And that's when you know that you are really building that community of promoters and supporters who have your back.
yeah, it brings a tear to the eye.
Yeah, it gets a little, it's like, well, wait a minute, I wrote those words, right? And it's just like, and we said that and they're feeling it, right? It just
Yeah.
validates that. Like that is a brand promise delivered, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is just so powerful.
Hmm. Yeah. And also like what you were saying about how, because I've seen that too, where, happy customers or longtime customers or friends or whatever come to the defense of the business in the comments and whatever. I love that because it's like you said, they're your ambassadors or whatever you want to say, they're your community, but it's like they're your protective armor before you've even had a chance to say anything, perhaps. And they're coming in there saying like, no, this isn't right. You're wrong. Like this is a great team. This is a whatever. And so I always love to see that too. And it shows that you're doing great work and we don't need to be bothered by this one outlier situation. So that's a really good point. And something you and I were talking about offline before we hopped into this conversation is you had mentioned that you've been on a soapbox lately about something. And you've been talking a bit online on your LinkedIn page specifically about the topic of responsible marketing. And I know you have there's some examples of some specific brands that you've called out about some online campaigns and ads that you've seen. And I want to talk about this because I feel like the phrase responsible marketing might be a newish phrase to some of my audience. So first, I'd love to understand before we get into the nitty gritty, what do you think, or how would you explain the concept of responsible marketing?
Yeah, I love this. I think responsible marketing, a lot of people probably define it different ways. I really think about
Mm-hmm.
it in terms of, when you're marketing, you understand the power of your message, you understand the power of using words, the power of imagery, the power of all of that together. And then you're
Mm-hmm.
using it with intention. right? So you're using it with the intention to be inclusive of people. You're using it with the intention to elevate voices. You're using it with the intention to just represent your whole audience.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit about that. It's hard, right? It's a discipline. So essentially asking marketers, creative people, brand leaders to really think about your messaging beyond just, is it clever, is it eye-catching, is it going to convert, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really thinking in terms of like kind of taking a little bit of that social responsibility piece to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as marketers, we the words we use are powerful. They help shape consumer perceptions. They help shape consumer behaviors in a lot of cases. And the world is a very different place than it was, 20 years ago, where you can have a tone deaf uh, ad that falls short and nobody really sees it, right? So now, in
Yeah,
the age
yeah.
of social media and the age of TikTok and the age of Instagram, right, it can really go viral very, very quickly, and it can have negative repercussions for your brand. I've seen some large brands, I would say, fall short in the last few weeks. Like one is there's an American Eagle ad with Sydney Sweeney, and it was her on a large billboard, and it said, Sydney Sweeney has great genes, and it was Genes, and then the genes was
Mm,
crossed out, and it said Jeans. And
mm,
so it just felt really, I saw that and I was like, goodness, did somebody really approve that in 2025? Right? Just feels
mm,
very, very tone deaf, I think, to
mm-hmm.
just include someone who looks like that with that type of a message, right? That,
Mm-hmm.
to anybody who doesn't necessarily look like her, the message is, you don't have great genes. And then I
Mm-hmm.
had a friend who on LinkedIn who actually mocked it up, and she had like a more inclusive version, right, where she had like, people of different ethnicities and like different body shapes,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all wearing denim. At the very bottom it said, we all have great genes, right? So think about the
Mm,
contrast there, right? Like, you're just, the message, right? The power of that message, the power of like inclusivity there. And then how many more jeans are you going to sell, right? When you're talking to this broader audience and really like helping everybody feel
yeah.
good about themselves in the clothes, in their product. One of the a really powerful example, I read this several years ago. It was a mom was taking her son back to school shopping, and they were at Target, and the little boy had cerebral palsy, so he was wheelchair bound, and then he would walk with a walker sometimes, but for the most part he was wheelchair bound. And they were in Target looking at clothes, and he was like jumping up in his seat, and he was like, "Mom, mom, mom!" And he was pointing to a sign, and the sign over there was a little girl walking with a walker, to school, up to the school bus. And he was just like, "Hey, she has a walker, right? She has a walker like me. This is so cool. I want to go look there," right? And the mom,
Mm,
went viral for the comment and this whole interaction. And it was like, for some people, for that little boy, that may have been the very, very first time he saw someone with his similar, with similar lived experiences represented on a store sign. Right. And so
mm,
it's just so incredibly validating to have those interactions and to really see yourself represented,
yeah.
especially if you are from a community or an audience that often isn't. And so when you really
Mm-hmm.
think about like, the responsibility there, it's just making sure that you're kind of including all those different audiences, and that your message
Mm-hmm.
is inclusive versus exclusive.
I have to say, first of all, I love this topic and just bringing awareness to this in conversation, because as someone who is a plus size woman and has been plus size since literally I was in grade school, times are very different now. And it was extremely hard for me to find clothes back then. It was devastating. It was very traumatic experience. And things are so different now, and that makes me so happy, especially for younger kids and girls growing up in that. But let me tell you, when I see an ad or a video or whatever where I feel my size and shape is represented, when that was never the case for decades,
Sure.
living up to now, it literally makes me emotional. It makes me so happy. It First of all, it makes me so grateful and impressed by the brand, and willing to give them a shot and look into them more. Like, one that's coming to mind right now is this brand called Pop Fit clothing. They make
Hmm.
leggings and shorts and bras and all that kind of stuff, and they have size, all the way across the board, from extra small all the way up. And they have models who are truly those sizes. I feel like a lot
Yeah.
of quote unquote plus size brands, they'll have plus size models, but like it's on the smallest size that they offer, and it's not the full spectrum representation of their audience,
Yeah.
of the clothes that they
Yep.
have. And so when PopFit came out and was like, hi, we're going to show you an extra small, we're going to show you a large, and we're going to show you, a 5X or a 6X. And it's really those folks wearing those clothes, it like lights me up. It makes me so happy. And I don't understand why there is a hesitancy for brands to do that, whether it's clothing or whether it's like what you're saying about the walker or whatever it is, like just having the awareness to say, like, not everyone is a blonde white guy or a blonde white woman or
Right.
like
Right.
and it's just so important. And I really couldn't agree more with you. And I wonder specifically, like we are talking about the Sydney Sweeney ad, how do you think that that happens? Like, is it like cluelessness, or is it the brand trying to like be edgy and like create conversation on purpose, or like what do you think is behind that?
If I am honest, and I did a little research on this as well, I
Okay.
think it stems from lack of representation in the room, right? I think it stems
Mm-hmm.
from this kind of group think, right? Where the decision makers are, from historically well-represented groups. They are, it's men, right? It's usually white men, and then you may have a couple of women thrown in there, right? But there was probably nobody right in the room who
Mm-hmm.
saw it early. And if there was somebody in the room, maybe they didn't feel empowered enough to speak up and raise their hand early and say, hey, this is not a good idea, right? This is not a good idea because it doesn't represent XYZ. And so you kind of get into this like bubble of group think, right? You're the CMO and you're like, oh, well, I have this great idea, or the agency brings it together, right? And either they just kind of steamroll the conversation and nobody feels safe to jump in. But I think it's more um, there isn't anybody in the room to speak up early enough to stop it.
Mm.
That's just how I've seen a lot of those decisions
Mm-hmm.
come to fruition in the past, right? Diverse teams put together diverse products, right?
Yes.
I often, like example, I think about like 10, 15 years ago, Bic came out with a pen for her. I don't know if you remember, but it was a big pen. And it was
Mm-hmm.
for ladies, and it was pink. And it was identical to the standard Big Pen, which had been around for 80 years. But now it was pink and it cost more. It had the pink surcharge and it was 10% more
Uh-huh.
or whatever else. And they ended up pulling
Oh,
it
how
within a couple of
clever.
weeks because this was even like before TikTok and all, this was like
Mm-hmm.
10, 15 years ago. So before things are what they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And all I keep thinking about is like, this is the stupidest thing ever. Like my hands, right? Just like my husband's hands, right? Like make a pen for a left-handed person, right? Like my daughter's left-handed, make a quick drying ink for someone who's left-handed and then sell me that. And it's okay if that costs 5% more or 10% more because probably R&D went into developing it, right? So like that I will support. But,
Mm.
how do men and women need different pens? Like, can you explain that to me like I'm a 5-year old, right? And all I keep thinking is like, was there not a single woman in the room who raised their hand and said, you know what, women don't actually need a different pen, right? And like,
Mm-hmm.
this is not a problem that we want to solve. And so sometimes these
Exactly.
products just like come to market, and I think the cost part of it is another psychological component. When you're talking about brands that are representative of different sizes, and truly
Mm-hmm.
have like all inclusive product lines, what I
Mm-hmm.
admire most is trying to see like is price parity across the full spectrum as well. So if you're going to charge me more for the double XL or the triple XL, are you charging me less for the extra small because that requires less fabric? Right. So
Yep.
then it's, because there's some brands that do this and like there will be a premium and the argument is, oh, well, it's more material, whatever else. But then this one should be, and I think it
Mm-hmm.
evens out, right? Brands that really do this through an equity lens, like they have a full spectrum clothing line and then all the sizes are the same because they know they're going to use more on the double XL and less on the extra small.
Mm-hmm.
But the consumer doesn't feel like, hey, I have to go pay more for, this T-shirt just because I fall in a different size. I think that is sort of maybe the evolution of that, right? Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
start off by offering all of them and then being truly representative in your messaging, but then also think about the equity and the accessibility of that,
Mm-hmm.
and pricing it evenly as well. Just
Yeah.
another layer to
Uh,
consider.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, when you were talking about the pen, it made me laugh because I'm a big fan of the show The Office, and it was reminding
Yeah.
me of when Stanley one day brainstormed the idea of paper, Papyr, and it is paper for women, which is pink and scented and silky soft. And he said, now you can watch the game and she can write a letter to her sister. So ridiculous, but I loved it.
Did we
But
just like go back to like 1895? One of our favorite shows we watched on HBO is The Gilded Age. I don't know if you've seen
oh
that
yeah,
or not, but it's like set
love the
during that
Gilded
time
Age.
frame, and like
Yep,
all the
yep.
ladies, they're all just like, oh, where's my mail? Where's my correspondence? Like your handwriting is
Uh-huh.
lovely. You should do my writing for me. And I just that's just what I think of. It's like I'm just gonna sit here and catch up on my correspondence because that's what I do while he's watching the game. Okay. Yeah,
Exactly.
not happening here. Sorry.
No, no, we're building brands over here, okay? We're doing shit. Um,
Love it.
also, also, I think what you said too about that feeling of no one was in the room to speak up, or no one felt confident or safe enough to speak up, speak out, when they were, maybe reviewing this idea. And I think that that's a very common thing. I know I've experienced that in my past life, in different corporate type spaces, nonprofit type spaces, like, you have these meetings, and I'm absolutely certain that there are opinions happening in our brains as we're sitting around the table, but it's like, who's going to be the one to say it? And oftentimes no one says it. And I like to think, I've been in my business now for 8 years. I've been out of that space, but I'd like to think that there's more of an awareness now. Times are changing and people are more open to other ideas, really want to hear the feedback. But I also know that a lot of my listeners are solopreneurs who, you know, the person to speak up is you yourself. Maybe there's not a whole team, but as you're reviewing something that you're going to publish or post or create or say or send or whatever, like think of some of the things that Kathy and I are talking about here today. Like, make sure that you're not just rushing to post, like really think about it, and maybe there's someone that could be a second set of eyes for you, like a
Totally.
sounding board.
I think
Yeah.
I think it is always, always, always a good idea to have a second set of eyes on
Mm-hmm.
anything, even if you're a solopreneur. I know I've been a solopreneur for the last 2 years as well. My
Mm-hmm.
biggest piece of advice there is like build a community, right? Build a community of people that you can be like, hey, I'm going live with this. Can you just take a second look, right? Do you see anything strange about this, right? And do it reciprocated, so it's not just always one-sided, right? I have a group of solopreneurs that actually meet with every 2 weeks. We have calls and we talk about some of the challenges we're facing. We're all women solopreneurs. We all have different niches and different verticals. A couple of them are coaches. A few of them are in Canada. Some are in the South, and so they're kind of all over. And we're talking about this in terms of like, you know, just supporting each other, right? Because we don't have those big teams that we can dive in and lean into as needed. And so I just think it's incredibly important to find that, right? Send it to your family, send it
Yeah.
to your friends, send it to, a couple of other people just to get their input. Um, because oftentimes you'll be surprised with what you find.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I that has been the case with me too. Like someone just saying, like, I don't know if you, are aware of this, or I'm not sure if you're really seeing how this comes across, and I don't mean just like a typo or something. I mean like, whatever the
Exactly.
the message is, or the tone, the point of view, whatever the thing is. So I think that that's a really great piece of advice of just finding your people. I've said this before, but whether that's an online group, an in-person group, a text chain, a Slack channel, whatever the things are, folks who are in a similar space as you, whether it's not, the same industry or not, doesn't matter as much, but just they can understand what it's like to run a business, what the struggles are, and it's so helpful to see other people dealing with the same crap and knowing that you're not alone, and that, maybe someone went through this exact same experience 2 years ago and they have, the ability to share their story. So I love that idea. Because so many of us, like we're in our silos, we're solopreneurs, it can get lonely in the entrepreneurial space, and so having that space where you can bounce ideas back and forth, I think, is is really, really important.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And just having that sense of community, right? Of like, I'm
Yeah.
not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kathy, this was such a great conversation. I really I learned so much talking with you, and I'm really, really excited to do my NPS score thing because I literally
Yes.
never heard of that. I'm excited about that. Um, and something that I do like to ask all of my guests as we wrap up is what is something that you are obsessed with these days? Like something that just lights you up and brings you happiness, whether it's music, a food, a destination, a person, a book. Like, what's something that you just love right now?
Yeah, that's a fun question. I love that you ask everybody that. So it is summer. It is summer in Maine, and we only get a few
Hmm.
months of it. So it is, typically May through August, like late August is all we get. And this summer we have expanded our outdoor garden. So
Ooh.
we had like small little garden boxes before, but this year we paved it so it's like all even. We put these like really fancy industrial garden boxes on it. We put a
Mm.
little gate off to keep my 90-pound golden retriever away from it. My husband calls it the maximum, he calls it the maximum security vegetable penitentiary. You can tell that he is an attorney. And then, of course,
Uh-huh.
me, the marketer, had to go get a sign for it. But we are
Love it.
growing tomatoes, cucumbers. We have sunflowers that are taller than the tree. It's like they're like 10-foot tall
Mm.
sunflowers. So the girls and
Wow.
I will go out there and we'll, harvest fresh vegetables, like fresh tomatoes off the vine. We have cucumbers. And so it's just been so much fun trying to just like grow that right from the ground up. And I feel like the season here is so short
Mm.
that we're just really soaking it in and enjoying as much as we can. So it's my summer hobby this year is really leading into the home garden.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, make the most of it. That's so much fun. Yeah, my mom has a little home garden too, and she's just loving it. Like she sends me her picture updates with what's in harvest today, maybe what didn't come up so great. We're not going to do that one again, but it's just so much fun growing your own food, and then you're like so proud, like having your salad or
Right,
having your roasted veggies or whatever,
right.
like it's a big deal.
It is.
Love
It
it.
is. Yeah.
So thank you so much, Kathy. This was really great. Everyone, be sure to hop into the show notes. I'm going to put Kathy's links in there for Belle Bear Marketing
Please.
and her LinkedIn page. And I just think that there are so many tips in this episode, specifically that part about the messaging or the positioning and messaging formula that Kathy gave us, which was awesome, and a lot more. So thank you so much for diving into all these topics with us. I know that it's going to inspire my listeners. Any last words? Anything else you'd like to add as we wrap up here?
No, I think it's been great. I think I've had so much fun just going down this rabbit hole of marketing and all those pieces. It's been wonderful learning a little bit about your audience, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, I'll talk with you soon. Bye bye.